Hey guys, and welcome back. Tonight, we're going to be talking about a job that makes modern extreme sports look like a quiet afternoon of knitting. We're traveling back to the heart of the Eastern Roman Empire, to the magnificent, terrifying, and utterly chaotic city of Constantinople. And we're going to follow the career path of someone who chose a life of unimaginable fame, incredible wealth, and a statistical probability of a very, very short and dramatic ending. We're talking about the life of a Byzantine Hippodrome racer. It was a world of thunderous applause, political intrigue, and 4-horsepower machines with no brakes, no seatbelts, and a social media following of about 200,000 screaming fans who might literally kill you if you lose. It's an incredible story of human grit and just a touch of insanity. As always, if you enjoy what I do here, and only if you genuinely enjoy it, a quick like or subscribe is always deeply appreciated. It lets me know you're out there, and I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight. It's always amazing to see this quiet little community stretching all across the globe. Just drop your city or country in the comments. It's nice to know we're all under the same sky, settling in for a little bit of history. Now though, it's time for that. Let's begin the ritual. Dim the lights in your room, pull up the covers, maybe get that extra pillow just right. If you have a fan, turn it on for that soft, steady hum. Take a slow, deep breath, and let the day fall away. You've done enough. There's nothing left to do now but rest. Let my voice be your guide as we leave our modern world behind and drift back in time together. Chapter 1. The Aspirant's Dream, from the streets to the stables. Before you can become a legend, you first have to be a nobody. And in Constantinople, the city of the world's desire, the queen of cities, there were a lot of nobodies to choose from. Imagine a city that is simultaneously the most glamorous, sophisticated metropolis on Earth, and also one of the most crowded, squalid, and frankly smelly places you could ever conceive of. It's a city of marble palaces with gold leaf mosaics that glitter in the sun, of towering churches that seem to scrape the heavens, of vast forums filled with ancient statues looted from 1,000 conquered cities. But that's the highlight reel. That's the Constantinople for the tourists and the senators. For our young aspirant, our hopeful hero, the city is something else entirely. He's a child of the alleyways, the messes' side streets, where the grand avenues of marble give way to narrow, winding lanes of packed dirt and cobblestone. Here, the air doesn't smell of incense from the Hagia Sophia. It smells of charcoal smoke, of frying fish, of unwashed bodies, of the tannery down the lane, and the overflowing sewer ditch at the end of it. The buildings are tall, rickety wooden tenements, leaning on each other for support like old drunks. They blot out the sun, creating a perpetual twilight even at midday. The sounds are a constant cacophony. The clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the shouts of merchants hawking their wares, the braying of a donkey overloaded with amphorae of wine, the endless murmur of a dozen languages from every corner of the known world. This is our young man's world, and in this world, your options are limited. You could follow your father into a trade, become a baker or a butcher or a weaver. You could join the army, hoping for plunder and a state pension if you managed to survive a few decades of border skirmishes. You could join the church, a life of quiet contemplation and guaranteed meals, or you could look up. And from almost anywhere in this sprawling, chaotic city, you could see it, looming over the rooftops, a vast, impossible structure of stone and marble, so large it seems to hold up the sky itself, the Hippodrome. To the boy in the alley, the Hippodrome is not just a building, it's another world, it's a symbol, it's the place where the emperor himself, the vice-regent of God on earth, comes to relax. It's where the city holds its breath, 200,000 strong, to watch God's battle on the sand. It is the ultimate escape hatch from a life of grinding poverty. The noise that pours out of it on race day is a physical thing, a tidal wave of sound that washes over the entire city, a roar of pure, unadulterated human passion that promises a life so far removed from the dirt and the darkness that it might as well be on another planet. Who is this boy? He's probably the son of a stable hand, or a retired, broken-down charioteer, or maybe just a kid from the docks with nothing to his name but fast reflexes and a complete lack of a self-preservation instinct. He's likely small and wiry. You didn't want to be a big, heavy charioteer. Every ounce slowed the chariot down. He's grown up hearing the stories, the legends of the great drivers. Names like Porphyrius, the living legend, a man who had statues raised to him while he was still racing, a man who had 7 monuments to his victories ringing the central spine of the Hippodrome itself. These weren't just athletes. They were demigods. They had the favor of the emperor, the adoration of the masses, and wealth that could rival senators. They wore silk, they ate from silver plates, and they commanded a level of celebrity that we would recognize instantly today. They were the rock stars, the A-list movie stars, and the Super Bowl champions of their world, all rolled into one. And our boy wants a piece of that. He sees the life ahead of him, a long, slow, anonymous grind, and he sees the blinding, glorious, and admittedly short-lived alternative playing out on the sand of that colossal arena. The choice, in his mind, is no choice at all. But how do you even begin? There's no little league for chariot racing. There are no high school teams, no draft combines. The path from the street to the stables is less of a staircase, and more of a sheer greased wall that you have to somehow find a handhold on. Your first step is getting noticed, and you do that by getting close. You hang around the stables. The great racing factions, the blues and the greens, the reds and the whites, had their headquarters, their clubhouses, and their vast stable complexes in the city. These weren't just a few stalls and a paddock. These were sprawling, military-grade facilities. Think of the headquarters of a modern Formula One team. But for horses, they housed hundreds of horses, sourced from the finest breeding grounds in North Africa and Spain. They employed an army of staff, grooms, trainers, veterinarians, wheelwrights, leather workers, physicians, and accountants. The factions known as the Dems were more than just sports clubs. They were vast, powerful social and political organizations, with their own fan clubs, their own militias, and their own political agendas. They were woven into the very fabric of the city. To join a faction was to choose a side in the great cultural war of Constantinople. So our boy starts at the bottom, the absolute bottom. He gets a job mucking out stalls. This isn't a wax-on, wax-off training montage from a movie. This is grueling, back-breaking, foul-smelling work. The stench of a Byzantine stable in the summer is something that modern sanitation has thankfully saved us from. A pungent, eye-watering miasma of horse manure, ammonia from urine-soaked straw, sweat, leather, and unwashed human bodies. It's a world of constant noise, the stamping of hooves on stone, the snorting and whinnying of 100 horses, the sharp commands of the stable masters, the clang of the blacksmith's hammer repairing a bent wheel. And for this, he gets a roof over his head, probably a straw pallet in a loft above the horses, and a daily ration of bread and beans. It's a step up from the streets, but barely, yet this is his foot in the door. His rookie contract is simply the privilege of breathing in horse dust from dawn till dusk. Here he learns the first and most important lesson of being a charioteer. It's not about you, it's about the horses. He learns their names, their temperaments, their quirks. He learns which ones are lead horses, calm and intelligent, and which ones are the wild, powerful trace horses that provide the raw horsepower. He learns how to groom them, how to feed them, how to spot the subtle signs of injury or sickness. He spends more time with these animals than he does with any human. He learns to respect them, to understand their language of flicking ears and stamping hooves. These animals are the multi-million-dollar assets of the faction. They are treated better than most of the people. A prize-winning horse was a star in its own right, with a name and a following known to every fan in the city. Injuring one through neglect was a firing offence. More likely, a beating and then firing offence. While he's shoveling manure and hauling water, he is watching, always watching. He watches the trainers, the old scarred men who know every trick in the book. He watches them work with the young colts, breaking them in, teaching them to run in a 4-horse team, to respond to the slightest touch of the reins. He watches the veteran charioteers when they arrive. They swagger into the stables with an aura of untouchable confidence. They are a different species. They are lean, muscular in the way of a gymnast or a jockey, all sinew and bone, with incredibly powerful arms, shoulders and core muscles. Their faces are often a roadmap of old injuries. A crooked nose here, a pale scar there. Their hands are a mess of calluses and old fractures. They don't look like marble statues. They look like men who have survived multiple car crashes. Our boy listens to their stories, their boasts about a daring pass on the final turn, their curses about an opponent who tried to shipwreck them, the delightful term for causing a crash. He absorbs the culture, the jargon, the brutal, unsentimental pragmatism of this world. He learns that the crowd's roar is a drug, that fear is a luxury you can't afford, and that the man racing next to you is not your rival. He is your enemy, and he will put you into the central barrier without a second thought, if it means he gains a single position. After months, maybe even a year of this drudgery, He might get his chance. A stable master, a dominus factions might spot something in him. Maybe it's the way he handles a difficult horse. Maybe it's the hungry, obsessive look in his eyes. Maybe it's just that they're short on prospects. The life expectancy of a charioteer was, shall we say, not geared towards long-term career planning. There was always a need for fresh blood. So one day, he's pulled aside. He's not given a glorious speech. He's probably just told, "You, boy, you think you can drive." And this is the moment his life pivots. He's taken to a practice track, probably a dusty field outside the city walls. He's not given a top-tier 4-horse racing chariot. That would be like giving a 16-year-old the keys to a Formula One car for his first driving lesson. He starts with something much more basic, perhaps a simple 2-wheeled cart, pulled by 2 older, calmer horses. The goal here isn't speed, it's survival. The first thing he has to learn is the stance. You didn't sit in a chariot. You stood. It was a tiny, shockingly flimsy basket of wood and leather, barely big enough for one man. There was no seat, no roll cage, nothing but a low waist-high wall at the front. Your only connection to this bucking, vibrating machine was the soles of your feet and your grip on the reins. And that grip was everything. Unlike in the movies, a charioteer didn't just hold the reins in his hands. That would be impossible. The pull of 4 thoroughbred horses at full gallop would rip them from his grasp in a second. Instead, he wrapped them around his waist. The reins were his throttle, his steering wheel, and his safety harness, all in one. He steered not just with his hands, but with his entire body, leaning his weight, shifting his center of gravity to guide the animals. This also meant that if he crashed, he was tied to a runaway, 4-horse catastrophe. This is why every single charioteer, from the rawest novice to the reigning champion, carried a sharp, curved knife, a falx tucked into his belt. In a crash, your only hope was to be able to draw that knife and saw through the leather reins that were dragging you to your death before you were pulped against a wall or trampled by the team behind you. It was a skill they practiced. The emergency exit from your own vehicle involved trying to perform surgery on your own waist harness while being dragged along the ground at 40 miles per hour. So, on the practice track, our boy learns the basics. He learns how to balance, how to absorb the brutal, bone-jarring shock of the wheels hitting ruts in the dirt through his knees. His legs and core ache with a fire he's never known. He learns the almost telepathic connection required to control 4 animals as a single unit. He learns that a gentle pull on the left rein doesn't just turn the team left. It has to be a subtle, precise pressure that communicates the command to the lead horse, who then guides the others. It's an art form, a brutal ballet of man and beast. And he falls. He falls a lot. He's thrown from the chariot, gets the wind knocked out of him, collects a spectacular collage of bruises and scrapes. The trainers are unsympathetic. They don't rush over with a first aid kit. They stand there, arms crossed, and wait for him to get up. If he stays down, his career is over. If he gets up, spits out some dust and blood, and limps back to the chariot, he might just have a chance. This process is less about teaching and more about filtering. It's a physical interview designed to weed out anyone who lacks the toughness, the resilience, and the sheer nerve required. It's a test of body, but even more, it's a test of spirit. Does he have that spark, that little bit of madness that makes a man tie himself to a team of barely controlled animals and ride into a storm of chaos for the amusement of others? As he gets better, he graduates. He moves up to 4 horses. The power is terrifying. It's a different animal entirely. The raw, explosive force of it is something he feels in the pit of his stomach. It's a constant struggle for control, a wrestling match with 1,000 pounds of muscle that wants to do nothing but run. He learns to manage the team, to keep them from breaking stride, to feel the rhythm of their gallop through the vibrating floor of the chariot. His training isn't just on the track. In the stable yard, his physical conditioning is relentless. He lifts weights, not dumbbells, but heavy stones or sacks of grain. He runs. He practices his grip strength, because holding those reins for the 7 laps of a race is an act of superhuman endurance. His arms and shoulders burn, his back screams, but he keeps going. He's building the body of a charioteer, a body that is light but incredibly strong, a wiry frame of pure functional muscle. He also learns the theory of the race. The trainers, old charioteers themselves, use pebbles on a dirt-drawn diagram of the Hippodrome to explain the strategy. He learns that the inside lane is the shortest path, but also the most dangerous. The graveyard turn around the tight posts of the mete is where most crashes happen. He learns how to box in an opponent. how to use his chariot to block their path. He learns the dirty tricks, how to lean over and whip not your own horses but your opponents, to throw them off balance, how to subtly lock wheels, a move that could send one or both of you spiraling into the central barrier, the spiner. He learns that the rules are, shall we say, more like guidelines. The only real rule was win. The crowd didn't pay to see sportsmanship. They paid to see courage, skill, and carnage. And psychologically, he is being broken down and rebuilt. The arrogance and fear of a street kid are stripped away and replaced with the cold, focused discipline of a professional. He learns to control his emotions, to remain calm in the heart of chaos. The roar of a practice crowd, just other stable hands and trainers shouting and jeering, is used to simulate the overwhelming sensory assault of the real hippodrome. He has to learn to block it all out, to enter a state of pure focus, where the only things that exist are him, his horses, and the track in front of him. He is being forged, hammered into a weapon for the faction. Throughout this entire process, he lives and breathes the faction. He is a blue, or he is a green. It becomes his family, his identity. His only friends are the other young men going through the same ordeal. They are his rivals, competing for the same few coveted spots on the race day roster, but they are also his brothers in arms. They share their meagre meals, tend to each other's injuries, and dream the same dreams. They talk of the day they will finally enter the Hippodrome, not as a spectator in the cheap seats, but through the carceres, the starting gates, as a warrior about to go into battle. Finally, after maybe years of this relentless preparation, the day comes. The master charioteer of the stable, the agitator, tells him he's ready. He's not going to be the lead driver. He'll be part of a team race, perhaps a junior event, but he will be racing. He's been assigned his horses, his chariot, a proper one, lightweight and stripped down for speed, and his colour. The simple leather tunic and leggings he'll wear will be dyed the deep azure of the blues or the vibrant emerald of the greens. The night before his first race, he probably doesn't sleep. He lies on his straw pallet in the loft, listening to the familiar, comforting sounds of the horses shifting and snorting below. He can hear the distant hum of the city, a city that doesn't know his name, a city that has no idea who he is. But tomorrow, that could all change. Tomorrow, he will ride out onto the biggest stage in the world. He will face the noise, the danger, and the terrifying possibility of either ultimate glory or a brutal, anonymous death. He has clawed his way up from the bottom, from the muck of the streets, to the heart of the faction. He has survived the training that broke other men. He has become a charioteer. The aspirant's dream, born in a filthy alleyway, is about to become a terrifying reality. Chapter 2. The Faction's Fury. Navigating the blues and the greens. The aspirant's dream, born in a filthy alleyway, is about to become a terrifying reality. And that reality, he is beginning to understand, is far more complex than just learning how to handle 4 horses at a full gallop. He has not simply joined a stable. He has been sworn into a tribe. He has been absorbed into a living, breathing, and often screaming entity that has tendrils reaching into every corner of Constantinople. He thought he was signing up to be a racer, a hero, an athlete, but in the eyes of the city, he is something more and something less. He is no longer the boy from the slums. He is now, and forever, a colour. You see, to understand the Hippodrome, we have to dispense with our modern ideas of sports teams. If you're picturing a group of fans who wear a certain jersey, get a bit loud on a Saturday, and then go back to their normal lives on Monday, well, you'll need to set that image aside. That is a pale, lukewarm shadow of the reality in Byzantium. Calling the factions of the Hippodrome fan clubs is like calling a hurricane a bit of a breeze. It fundamentally misses the scale, the power, and the terrifying city-altering passion of it all. These were the Dems, the Blues and the Greens. In Greek, the Venetoi and the Prasinoi. There were 2 other, older factions, the Reds and the Whites, but by this point in history they were essentially junior partners, their drivers and resources largely swallowed by the 2 great behemoths that dominated the city's consciousness. So for our purposes, for the life of our young driver, there are only 2 forces that matter, the blue and the green, an ocean and a forest, locked in eternal, brutal conflict. These weren't just teams you supported, they were a fundamental component of your identity, woven into the very fabric of your existence from the day you were born. Your faction was your neighbourhood, it was your political party. It was, in a very real sense, your social safety net, and quite often your local militia. It dictated who you drank with, who you did business with, and very often who you were willing to fight and die for over a disputed race result. Your social media profile, had such a thing existed, would have been your faction colour. Your allegiances were not chosen, they were inherited, absorbed from the very air you breathed in your district of the city. Let's try to untangle this. The Greens, the Prosinoi, were traditionally seen as the faction of the people. The artisans, the shopkeepers, the sailors, the butchers, the countless working hands that kept the great city breathing. They were perceived as more populist, more rebellious, perpetually railing against the establishment. There was a raw, chaotic energy to the Greens. They were the voice of the street, and their cheers in the Hippodrome often carried the edge of a complaint, a demand for cheaper bread or lower taxes. The Blues, the Venetoi, were their polar opposite. They were the establishment, the faction of the aristocracy, the great landowners, the senators, and the powerful bureaucrats who oiled the gears of the vast imperial machine. They represented order, tradition, and the status quo. To support the Blues was to align yourself with the existing power structures, with the wealth and majesty of the empire as it was. They saw themselves not as one side of a rivalry, but as the default state of things, and the Greens as a noisy, unpleasant disruption. And to make matters even more complicated, this deep social and political divide was mapped directly onto the great theological debate of the age. Now, we don't need to get lost in the finer points of 5th century Christology right before we drift off to sleep, but in the simplest terms, the empire was deeply divided over the nature of Christ. The official, state-sanctioned position, the one held by the establishment, was Chalcedonian orthodoxy, and this, naturally, was the position of the Blues. The Greens, on the other hand, tended to be monophysites. They held a different theological view, one that was particularly popular in the eastern provinces of Egypt and Syria, for the average Green supporter crammed into the stands. The complex theology was likely less important than the simple fact that it was their belief, and not the belief of the smug, arrogant Blues. Religion became just another uniform, another banner to wave in the face of the enemy. It added a layer of divine righteousness to what was already a blood feud. When a green charioteer urged his horses on, he wasn't just racing for a trophy, he was racing for the common man and for the very soul of the faith as he saw it. When a blue driver took the lead, it was a victory for order, tradition, and the emperor's own church. Every single race was a grand, thundering allegory for the struggles that defined the entire empire. Our young charioteer, now cloistered within the faction's compound, learns this reality with dizzying speed. He no longer has a name. Not really. To the city he is the blue hope, or the green upstart. His own personal history is sanded away, replaced by the deep mythic history of his colour. He eats, sleeps, and breathes the faction. His entire world is now contained within its walls. Life inside the faction is a strange mix of privilege and pressure. For a boy from the streets, it's a paradise. The food is plentiful. The lodgings, while simple, are clean and secure. He is surrounded by the finest veterinarians, wheelwrights, trainers, and stable hands in the world. He is living inside a massive, well-funded machine dedicated to a single purpose, victory. But who pays for all this? Where does the money for the finest Libyan horses, the custom-built chariots, the salaries of hundreds of staff come from? It comes from patronage. Each faction was backed by the wealthiest men in the city. Powerful senators, shipping magnates, and silk merchants would pour fortunes into their chosen team. This wasn't a hobby for them. It was a critical investment in public influence. A popular charioteer was more than an athlete. He was a celebrity, a walking advertisement for his patron's power and generosity. The success of the faction on the track translated directly into political capital in the forums and palaces. So our young driver is not an employee. He is a prized possession. He is a champion fighting horse, owned and cared for by men who expect a return on their investment. The pressure is immense, a constant, heavy blanket. He is not just racing for himself. He is racing for his patron's reputation. He is racing for the pride of his teammates. And he is racing for the tens of thousands of blue or green supporters who see him as the living embodiment of their hopes, their frustrations, and their collective identity. When he wins, they win. Their miserable week, their struggles with taxes, the arrogance of their blue or green neighbour, it all fades away in the golden dust of his victory. But if he loses, if he crashes, he has failed them all. The adulation of the crowd is a roaring fire that warms you in victory, but it can turn into a terrible, all-consuming inferno in defeat. He lives in a communal barracks with the other drivers, from the grizzled, scarred veterans to the other hopeful youngsters like himself. They are his brothers in arms, the only people on earth who understand the strange, terrifying life he now leads. They share meals, they train together, they risk their lives alongside one another on the track, but they are also his rivals. Every one of them wants to be the lead driver, the one who gets the best horses, the one whose name is chanted by the crowd. The camaraderie is real, but it is stretched thin over a sharp framework of professional jealousy. His days are a grueling, repetitive cycle. He is woken before dawn. He spends hours with the horses, learning their individual temperaments, their moods, their strengths. A horse isn't a machine, it's a partner, and a bond of trust is the only thing that will keep him alive when he's hurtling around the tight bend of the spina, the central barrier of the track, with another chariot's wheel just inches from his own. He runs, he lifts weights, he practices his grip until his hands are raw. His body is no longer his own. It is an instrument belonging to the faction, to be honed and perfected for the race. The trainers are brutal, unforgiving men. They are often former charioteers themselves, men whose bodies were broken on the track, their careers cut short by a shattered leg or a lost eye. They carry the ghosts of their own pasts, and they see in these young men a chance at a vicarious glory. They scream, they push, they demand more than seems humanly possible. They know that a moment of hesitation, a flicker of doubt in the heart of a driver, is the difference between a victory lap and being trampled into the sand by 40 thundering hooves. They are not trying to be cruel, they are trying to keep him alive by making him as hard and sharp as a piece of forged steel. Let's step out of the barracks for a moment and imagine ourselves as a citizen of Constantinople on race day. The energy in the city is electric, a low hum of anticipation that you can feel in the soles of your sandals. The streets are a river of colour, entire neighbourhoods empty out, their inhabitants flowing towards the magnificent bulk of the Hippodrome, a structure so vast it can hold over 100,000 people. You can see the divisions clearly. A group of men in green tunics passes a group in blue. No words are exchanged, but there is a tightening of shoulders, a hostile glare. The air crackles with unspoken rivalry. Inside the arena, the sight is overwhelming. It is a world carved into two halves. On one side, a great sea of blue. On the other, a veritable forest of green. The noise is a physical force, a continuous roar that presses in on you from all sides. It isn't just cheering, it's organized. The factions have their leaders, their demarchs, who act as choir masters for this vast, unruly congregation. They lead the crowd in chants and songs, some praising their own heroes, others heaping creatively vicious insults upon their rivals. And this is where the Hippodrome transforms from a sporting venue into a unique political theatre. The emperor himself is present, seated high above the track in the imperial box, the Kathisma. It's a gilded, protected enclosure, connected by a private passageway directly to the great palace. He is there to be seen, to preside over the games that he provides for his people. It's the classic strategy of bread and circuses, a way to keep the teeming, potentially volatile population of the capital entertained and distracted. But the people are not just passive spectators. The Hippodrome is one of the only places where the common citizen can directly address the most powerful man in the known world, and the factions are their megaphone. Between races, the chanting might shift. A demarch of the Greens will lead a cry not for his driver, but for tax relief, justice for the poor. 30,000 voices might scream in unison. On the other side of the track, the Blues might respond with a chant of their own, praising the emperor's latest military victory, and not so subtly, reminding him who his loyal establishment supporters are. The emperor has to listen. He can't ignore a roar of that magnitude. He might make a gesture, a nod, or even send a herald to make a proclamation. It's a delicate, high-stakes conversation between the ruler and the ruled. If you think your local sports rivalry gets heated, imagine if your team's performance also had a direct impact on imperial tax policy or the appointment of a new city governor. The stakes are almost impossibly high. Every cheer, every jeer, is laden with 1,000 years of social, political, and religious weight. For our driver, waiting in the tunnel beneath the stands, this noise is the soundtrack to his fear and anticipation. He can hear the rhythmic, thudding chants of his own faction, a sound that is both a comfort and a terrifying burden. They are chanting his name. He can also hear the boos and whistles from the other side, a wall of pure hatred directed at him personally, a man they have never met but despise with every fibre of their being, simply because of the colour of his tunic. And then, the gates are thrown open, and he rides out into the light. The wave of sound hits him like a physical blow. He is a tiny figure in the vastness of the arena. but for this moment, he is the absolute center of the universe for 100,000 people. The hopes and hatreds of a great city are focused on him and the 7 other men in their fragile wooden chariots. The race itself is a blur of violence and chaos, a subject for another time, but it is the aftermath of the race where the true nature of the factions is often revealed. A victory is celebrated with city-wide parties, with free-flowing wine provided by wealthy patrons. The winning driver is paraded through the streets, hailed as a hero, a living god. Poems are written in his honor. Statues might be erected. For a brief shining moment, he is the most important man in Constantinople. But a defeat, especially a controversial one, can curdle the mood of the city in an instant. The disappointed faction, sullen and angry, files out of the Hippodrome. Perhaps they feel they were cheated. Perhaps a blue driver cut off a green at the final turn. In the crowded streets, a blue supporter might shout a taunt at a passing group of greens. A fist is thrown, then another, and suddenly, the simmering tension of the day explodes into open violence. This is not a disorganized scuffle. The factions were, in many ways, organized gangs. They had recognized leaders and an informal command structure. A street brawl could quickly escalate into a full-blown riot. Neighborhoods associated with the rival faction would be targeted, shops would be looted, homes set ablaze. The city watch, the ancient equivalent of the police, were often too few in number and too intimidated to intervene effectively. For a night, or sometimes for days, whole sections of the city could be lost to anarchy. Urban renewal, Byzantine style, was often conducted with torches and pitchforks. These riots were a regular, almost accepted feature of life in the capital. It was the price the authorities paid for allowing these supercharged organizations to exist. They were a pressure valve for the city's discontents, but sometimes the valve would break and the steam would scald everyone. Our charioteer is insulated from the worst of this, whisked back to the safety of the faction compound, but he knows it's happening. He knows his performance on the track has real-world consequences. A sloppy turn that cost him the race might be the direct cause of a merchant's shop being burned to the ground that night. The weight of this responsibility is staggering. He is not just playing a game, he is playing with the fragile peace of a metropolis. And once in a generation, this delicate, violent equilibrium would shatter completely. This brings us to the most infamous, the most terrifying event in the history of the Hippodrome, the Nika riots of 532 AD. It is the ultimate example of what could happen when the faction's fury was truly unleashed. The reigning emperor was the great Justinian, a man of immense ambition and formidable will. His wife, the Empress Theodora, was a force of nature in her own right, a former actress who possessed a political mind as sharp as any man's. Justinian's regime was not universally popular. His heavy taxes, intended to fund his ambitious wars to reconquer the Western Roman Empire, were deeply resented. The city was a powder keg. Justinian and Theodora were traditional supporters of the Blues. This emboldened the Blue faction, who felt they had the emperor's tacit approval. Their members became more arrogant, more violent, knowing they were likely to escape punishment for their crimes against the Greens. The Greens grew more and more resentful, feeling that the scales of justice were hopelessly tilted against them. The spark came, as it so often did, from an arrest. A handful of Blue and Green members were arrested for murders committed during a recent spate of rioting. They were sentenced to be executed in the Hippodrome. This was standard procedure, but something was different this time. As the crowds gathered for the races, a strange mood settled over the stands. The usual taunts between the factions felt muted. When the time came for the executions, 2 of the condemned men, one blue, one green, survived a botched hanging. The crowd saw it as a sign of divine intervention. Monks spirited the 2 men away to a local church for sanctuary, but the city authorities, led by the deeply unpopular city prefect, surrounded the church, determined to carry out the sentence. This was the moment the system broke. In the Hippodrome, a delegation from the factions pleaded with Justinian for mercy for the 2 men. He ignored them, and then the unthinkable happened. The Greens, feeling unheard, began to chant, but the Blues, instead of shouting them down, joined in. Their separate identities, for a single terrifying moment, dissolved. The ancient, bitter rivalry was forgotten, replaced by a shared hatred for the regime. The chant that rose from 100,000 throats was not blue or green. It was a single, chilling word, repeated over and over. Nika, Nika, Nika. It means conquer or victory. It was the traditional cry of encouragement for a charioteer, but now it was a declaration of war against the emperor himself. The mob, now a unified, unstoppable force, poured out of the Hippodrome and into the city. They stormed the Praetorium, the city prefect's headquarters, and set it ablaze. They demanded the firing of the most hated government officials. Justinian, panicking, agreed. He dismissed his key ministers and hoped it would appease them. It did not. It only emboldened them. For 5 days, Constantinople burned. The rioters, their numbers swelling, were no longer just a mob. They were an army in control of the capital. They burned the original Hagia Sophia to the ground. They torched public buildings, the homes of senators, vast swathes of the most beautiful city on earth. They even appointed a new emperor, a reluctant nobleman they dragged from his home and crowned in the Forum. Inside the great palace, Justinian and his court were in despair. The city was lost. His generals, Belisarius and Mundus, advised him that the situation was hopeless. The escape boats were prepared. Justinian was ready to flee, to abandon his capital and his throne. It was in this moment of absolute crisis that the Empress Theodora, the former actress, delivered one of the most famous speeches in history. We don't know her exact words, but the historian Procopius gives us the gist. She stood before the terrified council and shamed them. She said that she would not run. Flight might save her life, but she would never live a day as a private citizen after having been an empress. She would not live to see the day when people did not call her Your Majesty. She declared that for her, the imperial purple was the noblest burial shroud. Her courage stiffened their resolve. Justinian, shamed and inspired, ordered his generals to do the impossible, retake the city. The plan was brutal and simple. The next day, the rioters, believing they had won, gathered once more in the Hippodrome to celebrate the coronation of their new emperor. Justinian's loyal general, Belisarius, took a contingent of his elite troops, hardened veterans of the Persian Wars, and sealed one of the main entrances to the Hippodrome. From another entrance, General Mundus led another force. The crowd was trapped. They were a disorganized, celebratory mob. The soldiers were a disciplined, ruthless killing machine. What followed was not a battle, it was a slaughter. The soldiers moved through the stands, cutting down everyone in their path. Blue, green, man, woman, child. They were not distinguishing between rioters and innocent spectators. They were extinguishing the rebellion in blood. By the end of the day, an estimated 30,000 people lay dead in the stands and on the sand of the Hippodrome. The great arena, the heart of the city's life, had been turned into a mass grave. The rebellion was over. The Nika riots were crushed. In the aftermath, Justinian was absolute master. He executed the new emperor he had never wanted to be. He confiscated the wealth of the senators who had supported the uprising. He temporarily abolished the games and stripped the factions of their power. But he couldn't destroy them. They were too deeply embedded in the city's DNA. Eventually, the games returned. The factions, humbled and chastened, slowly regained their influence. But the lesson was learned by all. The factions were a powerful tool for the people. But they were also a force of terrible destruction. The emperor tolerated them, even used them. But he would never again allow them to forget where the ultimate power truly lay. So why? Why would any emperor allow these chaotic, dangerous organizations to persist at all? It seems like madness. But the emperors of Byzantium were sophisticated political operators. They understood that the factions served a purpose. They were a necessary evil. The Hippodrome was a release valve. It allowed the teeming, often miserable population of a vast, crowded city to channel their aggressions, their frustrations and their passions into a semi-controlled environment. The rivalry between blue and green, for all its violence, was a substitute for other, perhaps more dangerous forms of social unrest. It was better to have them fighting each other over a chariot race than banding together to overthrow the government. The Nika riots were the exception that proved the rule. The one time the substitute failed and became the real thing. The emperor's role in all this was a precarious balancing act. He had to be seen as being above the factions, the impartial father of all his people. But in practice, every emperor had a preference. By subtly favouring one faction, perhaps by funding a new stable for them, or appointing one of their patrons to a high office, he could ensure he had a solid base of support in the city. But he could never be too obvious about it, lest he alienate the other half of the population and provoke them into rebellion. He walked a tightrope, constantly playing the two sides off against each other, a grandmaster in a deadly game of chess where the pieces were factions of tens of thousands of fanatical supporters. For our young charioteer, all of this history, this political manoeuvring, this threat of violence, hangs in the air around him. He is beginning to understand that he is not just an athlete. He is a political symbol. He is a religious icon. He is a potential trigger for a riot. He is a pawn in the Emperor's great game. His dream was to race, to hear the roar of the crowd, to taste glory. He has that now, but it has come with a weight he could never have imagined in that filthy alleyway where his dream was born. He has survived the training. He has been accepted by the faction. He has learned the unwritten rules of this complex, deadly world. He now knows what he is fighting for, and who he is fighting against. He understands the fury. He understands the chaos. His personal ambition is now inextricably bound to the fate of his colour, a colour that represents a worldview, a social class, and a side in a celestial debate. But all of that is abstract. It is the noise outside the starting gate. Soon, very soon, the gate will drop, and all the politics, all the religion, all the fury of the crowd will fade into a distant roar. In that moment, there will be only one thing that matters: the thunder of 16 hooves, the creak of his chariot's leather straps, the feel of the reins in his hands, and the terrifying, exhilarating emptiness of the track ahead. He is a part of the faction, but now he must prove his worth alone. Chapter 3. The Roar of the Crowd, the Spectacle and Mechanics of Race Day. And alone is exactly how it feels, even when you are the focus of 100,000 pairs of eyes. Inside the cramped, dark starting box, the carcereros, the world shrinks to the width of your chariot. It is a space filled with the smell of horse sweat, oiled leather, and your own sharp fear. You can hear your 4 horses, magnificent and terrifyingly powerful, shifting their weight, their muscles bunching and releasing like coiled springs. They know what's coming. They can feel the energy of the crowd bleeding through the stone walls, a low thrum that vibrates up through the chariot's wheels and into the soles of your feet. Outside, the noise is a distant sea, but in here, every sound is magnified. The jingle of a harness ring, the snort of your lead horse, the quiet, grim murmur of the attendant who stands ready to release the rope that holds the gate shut. The 12 starting boxes are arranged in a gentle curve, designed with the almost cruel geometric precision of the Romans to give every racer a theoretically equal start. You know this is a lie. The racers on the inside have the advantage, a shorter path to that first deadly turn. You, perhaps, are on the outside, a longer run, but maybe a clearer field of vision, a better chance to avoid the inevitable chaos of the opening crush. It's a trade-off you didn't get to choose. You look down at your hands, wrapped tightly in the leather reins, then you trace their path. They don't just end in your hands. That would be far too safe, far too sensible. The reins are wrapped twice around your waist, knotted securely. This is how you control the horses, leaning your body weight left and right, a brutal and intimate form of communication. It turns you and the chariot into a single creature. But it also means that if you fall, you are not thrown clear. You are dragged. You become an anchor, a toy for 4 panicked, stampeding animals. Tucked into your belt is the one tool you hope never to use, a sharp, curved knife, the falx. Your only hope in a fall is to have the presence of mind, while being battered against the ground, to draw that knife and saw through the thick leather reins before you are pulped. A comforting thought. All eyes in the Hippodrome, from the emperor in his gilded box to the poorest baker in the nosebleed seats, are fixed on one man, not you, not yet. They are watching the magistrate, standing high on a platform. In his hand he holds a simple white cloth, the mapper. The entire vast seething organism of the city holds its breath. The bookies freeze, their last bets taken. The vendors pause mid-pour. The faction leaders lean forward, their knuckles white. The magistrate raises the mapper. For a heartbeat that stretches into an eternity, there is a profound, impossible silence. It is the deep intake of breath before the scream, and then he lets it fall. The cloth flutters down, a silent white signal of pandemonium, before it even touches the ground. The attendants slam the levers. The spring-loaded gates of the carceries fly open with a synchronized percussive thwack, and the world dissolves into pure sound. It is not a cheer, it is a physical force. The roar of 100,000 people hits you like a solid wall, a wave of sound so powerful it feels like it could knock you from your chariot. And beneath it, a deeper, more primal noise, the thunder of 48 hooves, 12 chariots, 4 horses each, digging into the sand at once. The ground itself shakes. The air is thick with kicked-up earth, a red-brown cloud that chokes you and stings your eyes. You are no longer a man in a box. You are a component in a cavalry charge. aimed not at an enemy army, but at the first turn. There are no lanes, there are no rules of the road, there is only the desperate violent scramble for position. The chariot to your left tries to cut you off, its wheel hub, often sharpened for this exact purpose, coming within inches of your own spokes. A clash here, at this speed, would be catastrophic. You pull hard on the right reins, your body lurching, and urge your team forward, screaming at them, your voice instantly swallowed by the maelstrom. Let's pull back for a moment. Let's rise above the chaos and the dust, and see what you are a part of. We need to appreciate the stage on which this violent ballet is performed. The Hippodrome of Constantinople is not just a racetrack, it is the heart of the city, the soul of the empire, and a breathtaking piece of architecture. Imagine a modern football stadium, then stretch it into a vast U-shape, nearly 1,500 feet long. It is a man-made canyon of marble and brick, capable of seating, by some estimates, over 100,000 people. Forget luxury boxes and padded seats. Most people are sitting on tiered stone benches, packed shoulder to shoulder, a human tapestry of colour and noise. The track itself is a broad expanse of sand, carefully maintained, and running down its centre is the feature that gives the hippodrome its character, the spina. This is the central barrier, the median strip you and the other 11 charioteers will have to navigate around 7 agonising times. But this is no simple concrete divider. The spina is the world's most glorious and bizarrely curated outdoor museum, a monument to the empire's power, longevity, and its kleptomaniacal tendency to collect treasures from every corner of the known world. Anchoring one end is the colossal obelisk of Thutmose III. Think about this for a second. This is a single 200-ton spire of pink granite, carved in Egypt 1,500 years before the birth of Christ. It stood for millennia on the banks of the Nile, witness to pharaohs and dynasties we can barely comprehend, and a Byzantine emperor, Theodosius, decided he wanted it, so he had it dragged from its home, loaded onto a specially constructed ship, sailed across the Mediterranean, and somehow, through an engineering feat that still boggles the mind, erected it perfectly upright on a marble pedestal in the middle of his racetrack. As you thunder past, a fleeting shape in your peripheral vision, you are racing alongside a piece of history that was already ancient when Rome was a collection of mud huts. The pedestal it stands on is carved with scenes of the emperor himself, watching the races, a wonderfully meta piece of imperial propaganda. He is watching you both in person from his box, and in stone for all eternity. Not far from it stands another trophy from an even more distant past, the serpent column. It looks like a simple bronze pillar, but its story is staggering. This twisted column was forged from the melted-down shields of the Persian soldiers defeated by the united Greek city-states at the Battle of Plataea in 479 BC. It originally stood at the sacred site of Delphi, a monument to Greek freedom. Its 3 serpent heads, now long gone, once supported a golden tripod. Constantine the Great, the founder of this city, saw it, wanted it, and took it. So now this potent symbol of pagan Greek victory serves as a roundabout for Christian Roman charioteers. The layers of history here are so dense, it's dizzying. And there was more. The spina was littered with statues of legendary heroes like Heracles, of emperors, of mythical beasts, and even of previous champion charioteers, cast in bronze, forever watching their successors risk life and limb. It was a gallery of imperial might, a constant reminder to everyone, from the racers to the spectators, that all history, all glory, all power flows into this city and is laid at the feet of the emperor. At each end of the spindle are the turning posts, the metes. These are 3 large gilded cones, marking the tightest, most dangerous point of the track. This is where races are won and lives are lost. And to help the frenzied, screaming crowd keep track of the laps, there are 2 ingenious counters atop the spindle. On one end, a set of 7 bronze dolphins, on the other, 7 bronze eggs. At the end of each lap, an attendant would lower 1 dolphin and tip over 1 egg. It's a beautifully simple system in the midst of utter chaos. The dolphin was a nod to Neptune, god of the sea and horses, and the egg a reference to the mythical twins Castor and Pollux, patrons of horsemen, who were said to have been hatched from an egg. Even here in the Christian capital, the ghosts of the old gods lingered. Now, look to the long straight side of the hippodrome, the eastern flank. There, rising above the sea of commoners, is the kathisma, the imperial box. This wasn't just a VIP section, it was a direct extension of the Great Palace. A special passage connected the palace to the kathisma, allowing the emperor and his court to appear before the people, without ever having to set foot in the actual city streets. When the emperor entered, it was with enormous pomp and ceremony. He was the star of the show, and you, the charioteer, are merely one of his actors. From his elevated, protected throne, the emperor didn't just watch the races, he performed his job. The Hippodrome was one of the only places where the ruler and his subjects could interact directly, albeit in a highly controlled manner. The crowd could acclaim him, showing their approval, or they could shout their grievances. Chants would rise from the stands of the blue or green factions, not just for their drivers, but for tax cuts, for the removal of an unpopular official, for a change in religious policy. The Hippodrome was the emperor's oversized, very public focus group. A wise emperor listened to the roar of the crowd, using it to gauge the mood of his volatile capital. To ignore it was to court disaster. The Nika riots, which burned half the city to the ground and nearly cost the Emperor Justinian his throne, started right here as a chorus of angry race fans. So while you are risking your neck down on the sand, the Emperor is engaged in a different kind of race, a political one. He might make a show of favouring the blues or placating the greens. He might announce a public donation, a new building project, or the execution of a disgraced general, all from the comfort of the Kathisma. The spectacle on the track is intimately, dangerously woven into the spectacle in the stands, and the spectacle in the royal box. It's a three-ring circus of politics, sport, and mob rule. And what about that mob? Who are these 100,000 people screaming your name or screaming for your death? They are everyone. They are senators in fine silks, merchants, soldiers, craftsmen, dock workers, and beggars who spent their last coin to get in. For the price of admission, the Hippodrome offers an escape from the grime and toil of daily life. It is a festival of the senses. Vendors move through the stands selling wine diluted with water, bread, dried fruit and nuts. The air is thick with the smells of sweat, spilled wine, roasted food, and the ever-present faint tang of the city's less-than-perfect sanitation. Gambling is rampant and open. Men make and lose fortunes on a single race. Bets are placed not just on the winner, but on how many chariots will crash, or which lap the first crash will occur. Life is cheap on the track, and that makes for thrilling financial speculation in the stands. The crowd is not a neutral observer, it is an active participant. They are divided passionately and often violently into the factions. The two main ones are the blues, Veneti, and the greens, Procini, with the reds and whites being lesser, often subsidiary teams. This isn't like supporting a modern sports team. Your faction was your identity. It was tied to your social standing, your political leanings, and sometimes even your theological beliefs. The factions had their own clubhouses, their own leaders, and their own armies of hardcore fans who would frequently brawl in the streets before and after the races. When you race in the colour of your faction, your tunic, the plumes on your horses' heads, the ribbons braided into their manes, all declare your allegiance. The greens are seated on one side of the stadium, the blues on the other. They engage in call and response chants, taunting each other, singing praises to their drivers, and hurling curses at the opposition. The noise is constant, a partisan roar that ebbs and flows with the action on the track. If a green chariot takes the lead, half the stadium erupts in ecstasy, while the other half groans in despair, shouting insults and, if they can, throwing bits of food or refuse. You are their hero, their champion, the physical embodiment of their side's superiority. The pressure is immense. You are not just racing for a purse of gold, you are racing for the honour of half the city. Let's return to the sand. The first lap is over. An attendant dutifully tips one of the 7 bronze eggs. 6 remain. The initial chaos has settled into something resembling a strategy. The 12 chariots are now strung out. Perhaps 2 or 3 have crashed already, tangled in a mess of splintered wood, screaming horses, and broken men. The track has its own version of a clean-up crew, men who rush out to drag the wreckage and the bodies out of the way before the remaining racers come around again. Their work is grim and hasty. A tangle of wheels and horseflesh was considered a rather unfortunate, but entirely expected, part of the afternoon's entertainment. Now the real race begins. It's a 7-lap marathon of endurance and tactics, not just a sprint. That's nearly 3 miles of flat-out, life-threatening exertion. Your arms are already burning from the strain of controlling 4 frantic horses. Your legs are screaming from absorbing the constant jarring shocks of the chariot bouncing over the uneven sand. The dust is a permanent cloud coating your throat, making every breath a gasp. You are tucked in behind the lead chariot, a green, you are a blue. Your two other blue teammates are further back, trying to run interference, to block the other greens and reds from challenging you. This is a team sport. Your faction owner didn't hire 4 drivers to compete against each other. He hired them to ensure one of his chariots wins. One driver might be the designated leader, the star, while the others are effectively bodyguards on wheels. Their job is to be the oppressor, to crowd and bump and bully opponents, forcing them to take wide turns or risk a crash, creating an opening for you. The deadliest part of the track is the turn, the meta. You approach it at a terrifying speed. To navigate it successfully, you have to slow your inner horse while whipping your outer horse to run even faster, pivoting the entire 4-horse team and the chariot around a cone the size of a small car, with 10 other drivers trying to do the same thing in the same tiny space. The physics are unforgiving. If you turn too sharply, the chariot can flip. If you are too slow, the driver behind you will not hesitate to ram your wheel, locking them together in an act of mutual fiery destruction known as a naufragium, a shipwreck. This is where most crashes happen. The air at the turn is filled with the high-pitched streak of wood under strain, the desperate shouts of the drivers, and often the wet, sickening crunch of a catastrophic failure. You ride the turn perfectly, leaning so far into it, your body is almost parallel with the sand. Your inner wheel lifts slightly, a terrifying moment of instability, before crashing back down as you straighten out onto the long stretch. The green in front of you wasn't so lucky. He went too wide. This is your chance. You urge your horses on, moving to his outside. He tries to edge you towards the wall of the spiner. This isn't a gentleman's agreement to give each other space. This is bumper cars with 4 horsepower and a very high mortality rate. You can see the panicked look in his eyes, the grim set of his jaw. He knows you have the better line. For 100 yards, your wheels are inches apart. The noise is intimate now. You can hear his breathing, the crack of his whip, the leather of his harness groaning. You pull ahead. The roar from the blue side of the Hippodrome swells, a wave of pure adoration that washes over you, fueling you, giving you a surge of adrenaline. The green side howls in fury. 2 more laps. Your body is a wreck. Every muscle screams. The reins have cut grooves into your leather-wrapped torso. Your vision is blurred by sweat and dust, but you can feel the rhythm of your horses. You are in command. You know their strengths, which one starts to tire on the 5th lap, which one has the burst of speed for the final stretch. You are no longer a man driving horses. You and they are one single glorious forward-moving entity. The final lap, the last dolphin is lowered. 1 egg remains upright. The green you passed has fallen back, but another challenger, a red, is coming up fast on the inside. He is desperate. He is taking risks. He will try to steal the inside line on the final turn. You know this. You have 2 choices. Play it safe and take the turn wide, hoping your speed on the final straight is enough, or cut him off, risking a collision that would destroy you both just yards from victory. This is what separates the champions from the dead. It is a decision made in a split second, a calculation of speed, angle, and nerve. You hold your line, you trust your horses, you dare him to make a move, you swing into the final turn, your chariot groaning in protest. The red makes his move, diving for the inside. For a terrifying moment, his lead horse's head is beside your wheel, but he doesn't have the angle. He is forced to pull back or smash directly into the gilded cones of the meta. He pulls back. The turn is yours. The final straight opens up before you. It is the most beautiful sight in the world. There is nothing ahead but sand and glory. The roar of the crowd becomes an abstract, distant thing. You are focused only on the finish line, a simple white line drawn in the sand. You cross it, and the world erupts. The pressure of the reins around your waist vanishes as you expertly unwind them, a skill practiced as much as any turn. The chariot slows, your magnificent horses panting, their sides slick with sweat and foam. An official hands you the victor's prize, a simple palm branch. It is the symbol of victory, more valuable than any gold. You take a victory lap, a slow trot this time, the palm branch held high. The blue half of the stadium is a swirling mass of ecstatic joy. They throw flowers, ribbons, and small coins. They chant your name. In this moment, you are more popular than the emperor. You are a god. Later, there will be the prize money, a purse so heavy it could change your life, or at least pay off your debts. There will be the adulation in the faction clubhouse, the praise from your owner. But that is all in the future. For now, there is only this, the roar, the love of the mob, the taste of dust and sweat and triumph. You have survived. You have won. As the sun begins to set over the Golden Horn, casting long shadows across the now empty Hippodrome, the last of the crowds are filtering out into the city streets, arguing, celebrating, and already talking about the next race day. The great stone bowl of the arena grows quiet. The track is littered with the debris of the day, scraps of food, discarded programs, the deep grooves of chariot wheels, and darker damp patches in the sand that workers are already covering with fresh earth. You, the charioteer, are back in the stables. The adrenaline is gone, replaced by a deep, bone-aching exhaustion. Your hands are raw, your muscles tremble, the cheers have faded. It is quiet now, with only the soft sounds of the horses in their stalls. The god of the arena is once again just a man, tending to his animals, his body a map of bruises and scrapes. He has looked into the face of chaos, and for today at least, he has emerged on the other side. He is victorious. He is alive, and in a few days, he will have to do it all over again. Chapter 4. Glory and Gold. The life of a Byzantine superstar. But the quiet never lasts. The solitude of the stables is a borrowed piece, a brief intermission in the grand, deafening opera of your new life. Because as you step out from the shadows of the stalls, leaving the scent of hay and horse behind, you are met with a roar that has nothing to do with the race. This is a different kind of sound. It is the sound of adoration, the sound of a city that has chosen its new god. You are no longer just a man, aching and bruised. You are an idea, a victory. You are the living embodiment of the blue faction's triumph, or the green's vindication. The exhaustion is still there, deep in your bones, but it is now wrapped in a thick, glittering cloak of fame, and you find, with a jolt that is almost as startling as the crash you narrowly avoided in the final turn, that this cloak is heavier than you could ever have imagined. The life of a charioteer is a life of two halves. There is the man who guides the horses, and then there is the demigod who survives the chaos, and now you must learn to live as the demigod. The first and most tangible change is the weight in your purse. Before, your world was measured in small bronze coins, enough for bread, for wine, for the mending of a tunic. Now, your world is measured in gold. The prize for winning a major race, a Ludi Circus sponsored by the emperor himself, is not a polite handshake and a trophy. It is a staggering sum of money. A bag of gold solidi, each one stamped with the impassive face of the Augustus, heavy enough to make your arm ache. To a man who grew up on the dusty streets of the mess, it's an incomprehensible fortune. You run your fingers through the coins, the metal cool and impossibly smooth. This isn't just money, it is security. It is a wall between you and the gnawing poverty that defined your entire existence up to this point. And that's just the beginning. That's the official prize, the real wealth, the river of gold that transforms your life, flows from other sources. Your faction for one, the leaders of the blues or the greens, those powerful men who watch from their shaded boxes with the cold eyes of investors, are ecstatic. Their political rivals have been humbled. Their supporters in the city are celebrating. Their influence has swelled, and you are the instrument of that victory. They summon you to their villas, sprawling palaces of marble and mosaic on the hills overlooking the Golden Horn. You, who once would have been lucky to clean the stables of such a place, are now ushered into the triclinium, the grand dining room, as the guest of honour. Here, you see wealth on a scale that beggars belief. The air is thick with the scent of expensive incense and roasting meats spiced with cinnamon and cloves from the farthest reaches of the world. Servants, silent and numerous as ghosts, pour wine from jewelled carames, wine that is not the rough, sour stuff of the taverns, but a fine Falernian, carefully aged and sweet on the tongue. You are seated on a plush couch, propped up with silk cushions from Persia, a material so rare and costly that a single tunic made from it is worth more than the house you grew up in. And as you eat figs stuffed with honeyed nuts, and listen to the soft plucking of a lyre, your patron, a man whose name is whispered with fear and reverence in the Senate, will lean over. He won't make a grand speech. He'll just place another bag on the table beside you. This one is heavier, a bonus, a token of his appreciation.
It is not a gift. It is a down payment. It is a golden chain, reminding you that your next victory belongs to him as well.
Then there is the ultimate patron, the emperor himself. To be noticed by the Augustus is the dream of every citizen of the empire. For you, it becomes a reality. You might be summoned to the great palace, a sprawling city within a city of bewildering corridors, throne rooms and hidden gardens. You are escorted by Varangian guards, towering Norsemen in gilded armor, their loyalty bought and paid for by this very same gold. You are brought before the man who is considered God's regent on earth. He may not say much, he might simply nod, a flicker of a smile on his lips, and his chamberlain will present you with a gift. Perhaps it is a ceremonial dagger with a hilt of ivory and gold. Perhaps it is a deed to a small country estate, complete with servants and livestock. Or perhaps, most valuable of all, it is a sash of pure Tyrian purple silk, a colour so expensive to produce it is reserved for the imperial family alone. Wearing it is a declaration. It says, "I am protected. I am the emperor's man." For a charioteer, whose life is a constant gamble, this is the greatest prize of all. For a little while at least. You begin to spend. You have to. The money is a fire in your hands. You buy a house, a proper stone house, not a flimsy wooden shack in a crowded tenement block. A house with its own courtyard, perhaps even a small bath. You buy clothes made of fine Egyptian linen and soft wool, dyed in vibrant colours. You buy slaves to manage your household, to cook your food, to carry your things when you walk through the city. It is a strange and unsettling transformation. The men who were your childhood friends now look at you with a mixture of awe and envy. They bow their heads. They call you Dominus, Master. You are no longer one of them. You have ascended, but you are not a nobleman, not one of the old families who can trace their lineage back to the founding of Rome. You are new money. Your hands are still rough with calluses from the rains. You might know how to handle 4 frantic horses at full gallop, but you have no idea which fork to use for the fish course at a senator's banquet. You are caught between 2 worlds, belonging fully to neither. But the gold, as much as it changes your material world, is only the fuel. The real engine of your new life is something far more intoxicating and far more dangerous. It is glory. In Constantinople, a victorious charioteer is not just a successful athlete, he is a superstar. He is a hero. He is, for a time, the most famous man in the largest city on earth. When you walk down the Mezi, the great central artery of the city, the world parts for you. The endless river of humanity, merchants shouting their wares, soldiers marching in formation, beggars pleading for alms, priests chanting in procession, seems to falter. The space clears around you. People stop. They point. They whisper your name, first with uncertainty, then with growing excitement. It's him. It is Porphyrius. Or look, it is Constantinus. Small children, their faces smudged with dirt, run after you, trying to touch the hem of your tunic for good luck. Women look down from their balconies, their faces hidden behind latticework, and you can feel their eyes on you. Shopkeepers come out of their stalls and offer you their finest wares as a gift. A perfect melon, a fresh loaf of bread, a small cup of wine. To refuse would be an insult. To accept is to acknowledge your new station. You have become public property. Your face is now more recognizable than that of most senators. You are the original influencer, your every move scrutinized, your victory celebrated in tavern songs, your losses dissected in the public baths, your opinion on the quality of the grain shipment, on the latest theological dispute, on the performance of a certain general, none of which you are qualified to have, is suddenly sought out and repeated as though it were gospel. You are no longer just a man who drives horses. You are a symbol for your faction. A victory for the Blues is seen as a sign of divine favour, a validation of their political and even their religious leanings. Your success is their success, and they will shower you with an affection that is as overwhelming as it is fickle. This fame is then, quite literally, set in stone. The greatest champions are immortalised. A wealthy patron, or perhaps your faction itself, will commission a statue of you. You will spend hours posing for a sculptor, standing perfectly still while he measures the breadth of your shoulders, the length of your arms, the determined set of your jaw, and then, one day, in a public square, or perhaps even within the hallowed grounds of the Hippodrome itself, a new monument is unveiled. It is you, carved from pristine white marble, larger than life, your bronze likeness holding the reins, your horses captured in mid-gallop, their sculpted muscles straining with effort. You stand in the crowd, anonymous for a moment, and watch as people gaze up at this idealized version of yourself. It is a profoundly strange experience. You see your own face, but it is perfect, unblemished by scars, a look of serene confidence in its eyes that you have never, not once, felt in your life. That man of marble knows no fear. You, the man of flesh and blood, no little else. Even more prestigious are the mosaics. In the villas of the wealthy, in the reception halls of faction leaders, your image becomes a part of the decoration. You are captured forever in thousands of tiny, glittering tesserae of coloured glass and stone. There you are, rounding the spina, your whip raised, the colours of your faction, the deep blue of the sea, the vibrant green of the earth, shining with an inner light. You are now art. You are a permanent fixture in the homes of the powerful, a conversation piece, a testament to your patron's excellent taste in charioteers. People will recline on their couches, sipping wine, and gaze at your face for the next 500 years. You have achieved a form of immortality, a flat, two-dimensional immortality, but immortality nonetheless. Poets, hoping for a small purse of coins from you or your patron, will compose epigrams in your honour, short, witty verses celebrating your skill and courage. They compare you to Achilles, to Hercules, to the gods themselves. These poems are recited at banquets and copied onto scrolls. Generations from now, scholars will read these lines and debate the exact nature of your legendary skill. You have become a part of the literary record. This life of glory is a gilded cage. You are invited to social gatherings that were once impossibly far above your station. You dine with men who command legions and control the flow of grain and silk across the empire. You must learn their ways. You must learn to hold your wine, to laugh at the right jokes, to offer vapid but pleasant compliments. You must learn the subtle art of conversation, which in these circles is a battlefield all its own. A misplaced word, an opinion offered too forcefully, an alliance accidentally slighted. The consequences can be far more severe than taking a corner too wide in the Hippodrome. You are surrounded by people, but you have never been more alone. They don't see you, the man who grew up with nothing, the man who still has nightmares about the screams of a fellow driver trapped under his chariot. They see the myth, they see the statue, and your job, your second full-time job, is to never ever let them see the terrified, aching man behind the marble facade. Because for every piece of gold, for every cheer, for every mosaic tile placed in your honour, there is a price. A terrible, silent and ever-present price. The glory is a brilliant, blinding sun, but it casts a very long and very dark shadow, and in that shadow, peril waits patiently. The first and most obvious peril is the one you face every time you step into the chariot. It's the same danger that has always been there, but now it feels different. Before, when you had nothing, death was just the end. Now, you have everything to lose. The beautiful house, the silk tunics, the respect, the fame. Every single race is a gamble, not just with your life, but with your entire world. You look at the packed stands of the Hippodrome, you hear the roar of 100,000 people chanting your name, and the fear is colder than ever before. You see the ghosts of the arena more clearly now. You remember Marcus, who was crushed against the spina 2 seasons ago. You remember Euthemius, whose axle snapped on the final turn, whose own horses trampled him into the sand. They were good drivers. They were fast. It didn't matter. The chaos of the track is impartial. It doesn't care how famous you are. It doesn't care how much gold you have. The physical toll is relentless. The body of a charioteer is a roadmap of pain. You live with injuries that never quite heal. A shoulder that clicks with every movement. A knee that swells up in the damp weather. Fingers that were broken and set badly. That ache with a dull, persistent fire. You fall asleep at night not to silence, but to a symphony of your own body's complaints. Modern athletes have teams of doctors, physical therapists, nutritionists. Your medical care consists of a back-alley physician who will stitch up a wound with a dirty needle and offer you a cup of wine mixed with poppy extract to dull the pain. Your long-term health plan is hoping you don't get thrown from the chariot. The Roman concept of disability benefits was to be given a nice funeral if your faction was feeling generous. Your career is brutally short. A man is in his prime as a charioteer from his late teens to perhaps his late 20s. By 30 you are considered a veteran. By 35, a relic. One bad crash, one injury that cripples you, and it's all over. The fame, the gold, the adoring crowds, they will vanish overnight, and a new, younger, faster man will take your place. His statue will be erected next to yours. Then there is the pressure. It is a physical weight. You feel it pressing down on you from the moment you wake up. It comes from your faction. Those leaders who feast you in their villas are not your friends. They are your owners. They have invested fortunes in your horses, your equipment, and in you. A loss is not just a personal disappointment. It is a catastrophic financial and political event for them. After a defeat, you will be summoned to the same villa. There will be no feast. The wine will not be offered. The patron's voice will be quiet, his eyes cold. He will not shout. He doesn't need to. He will simply talk about his investments. He will mention the vast sums he has lost in bets. He will talk about the mockery he is enduring from the leaders of the rival faction. He will remind you, in the politest, most chilling terms, that his patronage is not unconditional. The unspoken threat hangs in the air, thick and suffocating. You are of immense value to him when you win. You are worth nothing when you lose. And in Constantinople, things that are worth nothing have a tendency to disappear. The pressure from the crowd is just as intense, and far less subtle. The same 10,000 mouths that screamed your name in triumph will howl for your blood in defeat. The love of the mob is a raging fire. It warms you, but get too close or falter for a moment, and it will consume you entirely. If you lose a critical race, you will not be greeted with polite applause for a good effort. You will be met with a barrage of curses, of rotten fruit, of stones. You will have to be escorted back to your home by guards, not to protect you from adoring fans, but from enraged gamblers who lost their savings on you. They loved you not for who you are, but for what you did for them. The moment you stop winning, that love curdles into a bitter, violent hatred. You learn to dread the silence that falls over the Hippodrome when you are overtaken, a silence more terrifying than any roar. It is the sound of adoration dying. And this all exists within a city that is a tinderbox of political and religious strife. The Hippodrome is not just a sporting venue. It is the political heart of the city. It is where the emperor and the people meet. It is where public opinion is forged, and where riots are born. And you, as the star of the blue or the green faction, are not just an athlete. You are a political figure, a symbol. Your victories and losses have real-world consequences. A string of victories for the Greens might embolden their supporters to demand tax cuts or to protest a new imperial decree. A controversial loss could be interpreted as cheating, as a conspiracy by the Blues and their allies in the government, and the fury can spill out from the Hippodrome into the streets, leading to burned buildings and brutal street fighting. You are a pawn in a much larger game, a game played by senators, generals, and the emperor himself. You are forced to navigate a treacherous world of intrigue you barely understand. A senator might approach you and ask you to consider letting his nephew's favoured charioteer win a minor race. A favour. He'll make it worth your while. What do you do? To refuse is to make a powerful enemy. To accept is to betray your faction. And if you are discovered, your life is forfeit. You might be asked to deliver a message, a seemingly innocent scroll to another powerful figure. You have no idea what the message says. Is it a love note? Or is it the final piece of a plot to assassinate the emperor? You don't know, and you know it is better not to know. You just smile, nod, and pray to whatever God will listen that you have chosen the right side. The most dangerous position of all is to be the emperor's favourite. The warmth of the imperial sun is life-giving, but its glare can also burn. As long as you win, you are a symbol of the emperor's own glorious reign. He will shower you with gifts and praise, but the moment you start to lose, you become an embarrassment, a symbol of his fading fortunes, and emperors do not tolerate embarrassment. Worse still is if your popularity begins to eclipse his. If the crowd roars louder for you than they do for him, when you both enter the Hippodrome, you have become a threat. You are a rival for the affections of the people, and in the paranoid world of the Byzantine court, a rival is an enemy to be removed. A quiet word from the emperor to your faction leader, a suggestion that perhaps your nerve is gone, that a younger man should be given a chance, or perhaps something less subtle, a splash of poison in your wine at a celebratory banquet, an accident in the stables late at night. The official cause of death will be a fever, or a tragic fall. Everyone will know the truth, and no one will say a word. This is the psychological reality of your life. You live in a state of constant gnawing anxiety. You are surrounded by luxury, but you can't enjoy it. You eat the finest food, but you are always wary, wondering if the man who served it was paid off by a rival. You sleep on soft linens, but your rest is shallow, filled with nightmares of splintering wood and screaming horses. You become intensely superstitious. You develop elaborate rituals before each race. You will only put on your left boot first. You must touch a specific spot on your favourite horse's neck 3 times. You wear amulets under your tunic, a small cross, a carved piece of bone, a pagan charm you bought from an old woman in a dark alley, hedging your bets with every deity you can think of. You search for omens in everything. the flight of a bird, the shape of a cloud, a stumble on the palace steps. You are desperate for some sign, any sign, that the universe is on your side today. You lose yourself. The line between the man and the myth begins to blur. Are you the frightened boy from the slums, or are you the marble statue in the square? You perform the role of the confident champion so often that you begin to forget who you were before. The friends you had are gone, alienated by your wealth, or simply left behind. The new friends you have are sycophants and politicians who want something from you. You are an island of fame in a sea of people. You are seen by everyone and known by no one. And so you find yourself late at night, after the feasts and the accolades, alone in the silent courtyard of your grand house. The moon is out, casting a pale silver light on the world. You might have a small replica of your own statue, a miniature bronze on a table. You pick it up. It's cold and heavy. You look at its perfect, fearless face. This is what they love, this piece of metal, this idea of a man who never falters, who always wins. You put it down and look at your own hands. They are scarred, trembling slightly. Your body is a tapestry of old pains about to be stitched with new ones. The gold in your coffers is a comfort, but it cannot buy you peace. The glory is a roar in your ears, but it cannot drown out the whispers of fear in your own soul. You are at the absolute pinnacle of your world, a living legend, an immortal in mosaic and stone, and you know, with a certainty that chills you to the bone, that you are one corner, one snapped rein, one moment of chaos away from becoming nothing at all. Chapter 5. When the Circus Burns. Politics, Riot, and Religion. And sometimes that moment of chaos doesn't come from a snapped rein or a rival's skillfully thrown curse tablet buried beneath the track. Sometimes it doesn't come from within the walls of the arena at all. Sometimes that chaos is a fever that has been brewing in the city for months, a low-grade political temperature that suddenly spikes. And it finds its voice, its form, and its fury right there, in the stands, among the thousands of people screaming your name. You learn very quickly that the line between a cheer and a war cry is terrifyingly thin. You learn that the crowd is not a single entity that loves you. It is a beast with two heads, eternally at war with itself, and only temporarily united in its adoration of you. Those two heads have names, they have colours, the blues and the greens, the venatoi and the prosinoi. To a modern observer, we'd be tempted to call them fan clubs, and we would be so profoundly, dangerously wrong. Calling the blues and greens fan clubs is like calling a hurricane a bit of a breeze. It misses the scale of the thing entirely. Imagine if your favourite sports team was also your local political party, your neighbourhood watch, your trade union, and on a bad day your organised crime syndicate. That's what you're dealing with here. These factions, these demes, were woven into the very fabric of Constantinople. The city was divided into districts, and each district was loyal to either the blue or the green. They had their own leaders, their own treasuries, and their own militia, who were supposed to help with civil defence, but often spent their time engaging in what we might politely call vigorous debates with the opposing faction in the streets. These debates frequently involved knives, clubs, and a general disregard for private property. You, as a star charioteer, are the property of one of these factions. Let's say you drive for the Greens. You wear their colour. You are their living emblem of victory. When you win, it isn't just a sporting triumph, it's a political statement. It's proof that the Greens and their supporters are blessed, that their cause is just, that their side of the city is stronger, faster, better. The emperor himself, along with the imperial court, traditionally supported one faction or the other. This wasn't like a modern president throwing out the first pitch. This was a public declaration of alignment. For a long time, the imperial house had favoured the blues, the faction often associated with the wealthy aristocracy and the established orthodox faith. The Greens, in turn, tended to draw their support from the working classes, the merchants, the artisans, and sometimes those with sympathies for the more controversial theological positions, like monophysitism. Now let's be clear, most of the men screaming in the stands probably couldn't give you a detailed breakdown of the Christological controversies decided at the Council of Chalcedon, but they knew which side they were on. They knew the blues were the establishment, the landowners, the ones who seemed to benefit from the tax policies that were making life so very, very expensive. And they knew the greens were, well, them. This wasn't a theological debate. It was identity politics played out with 200-pound horses at 60 miles per hour. Every race was a proxy war for the soul of the city. And into this simmering pot of social, religious, and political tension walks a new emperor, a man named Justinian. Justinian is not a man who does things by halves. He is ambitious, tireless, a micromanager with an ego the size of the empire he wants to reclaim. He dreams of restoring the glory of Rome, of reconquering the lost western provinces. He is a legislator, a builder, a theologian. And to fund these grand ambitions, he needs money. Lots and lots of money. This means taxes, new taxes, efficient taxes, taxes collected with a ruthless and unyielding zeal by his ministers, men like John the Cappadocian and Tribonian, who quickly became two of the most hated men in the city. If you think people get upset about tax season now, imagine if the IRS agents were also rewriting all the laws and were widely suspected of being corrupt on a scale that would make a modern oligarch blush. The popular mood in Constantinople in the early 530s was, to put it mildly, sour. The people felt squeezed. They felt the emperor, a man from a humble background himself, had forgotten them, siding with the aristocrats. And where do you go in this world to voice your displeasure? There are no elections as we would know them, no free press, no organized political opposition. There is only one place in the entire Byzantine Empire where a common man can stand in the presence of the emperor and shout his opinion without being immediately arrested for treason. The Hippodrome. It is the city's pressure valve. The races are the one time the emperor is a captive audience. Chants of long life to the emperor could just as easily curdle into down with the tax collector, and Justinian, who along with his formidable wife Theodora were staunch supporters of the blues, often found himself on the receiving end of the Greens' organized and very loud complaints. This is the world you inhabit. Every time you climb into your chariot, you are not just a sportsman. You are a lightning rod for the hopes, fears, and frustrations of half the city. The gold the emperor might award you is less a prize and more a political endorsement. The roar of your fans is both your shield and the source of the danger. You exist in this strange space, adored by a mob that could, if the mood shifted, just as easily decide to tear the whole world down. And in January of 532, the mood shifted. It started, as these things often do, with something that was simultaneously serious and, in the grand scheme of things, mundane. There had been riots before. Street fights between the blues and the greens were a regular feature of city life. After one such scuffle, the city prefect had arrested several of the ringleaders and, in a show of even-handed justice, sentenced a few from each side to be executed. Justice, in Constantinople, was a brutal and public spectacle. But the execution was botched. Two of the condemned men, one blue and one green, survived the hanging. The crowd saw it as a sign of divine intervention. The men were hustled away and took sanctuary in a nearby church. This should have been the end of it, a strange anecdote for the city to gossip about. But the city prefect was stubborn. Justinian was stubborn. They wanted the men. The factions, for once in their lives, found themselves on the same side. They both wanted their man pardoned. A delegation of blues and greens went to the emperor. He refused them. And so we come to January 13th, 532, the day of the races, the day the pressure valve was supposed to release the city's steam. Instead, it was the day the whole boiler exploded. You are there, in the stables, preparing for your race. You can hear the crowd filing in. The sound is different today. There's an edge to it. The usual boisterous competition between the factions is muted, replaced by a low, unified hum of discontent. The air itself feels thick with it, charged like the moments before a thunderstorm. You race. Perhaps it's the second race of the day, or the third. As you round the spina, a blur of colour and sound, you hear the chant begin. It's not your name, it's not blue or green. It's a single word, repeated by tens of thousands of voices, starting as a rumble and growing into a deafening rhythmic roar that shakes the very stones of the arena. Nika, 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 victory, or conquer. It's the chant of the victor, the cry of the triumphant. But who is it for? Not for you, not for any charioteer. It is for them. It is the blues and the greens, united in a single terrifying voice, chanting at the imperial box, at the impassive face of Justinian himself. They are no longer two factions, they are one mob, and their demand is clear. Justinian, from his high perch, misreads the moment. Perhaps he sees it as a challenge to his authority that must be met with imperial disdain. He does not yield, he holds firm, and in doing so, he snaps the last thread of civility. The roar changes. The chant of Nika is joined by insults, curses, and demands for the heads of his hated ministers. The crowd as one begins to surge. They are not waiting for the next race. The spectacle on the track is forgotten. They have become the spectacle. They pour out of the Hippodrome's exits, not as fans going home, but as an army spilling into the streets. The first building they attack is the Praetorium, the city prefect's headquarters. They overwhelm the guards, set it on fire, and release all the prisoners inside. The riot has begun. The beast is loose. For you, the charioteer, this is a nightmare of a different colour. The place of your greatest glory has just become the epicenter of an insurrection. The rules are gone. The city you know is beginning to dissolve into fire and chaos. Your fame means nothing now. Your wealth is a target. You are associated with a system that is currently being torn apart by a furious mob. Your primary goal is no longer winning a race. It is survival. You and your fellow racers, your trainers, your grooms, you barricade yourselves in the stables, hoping the tide of violence flows past you. You can smell the smoke. You can hear the screams, the sound of a city eating itself alive. Over the next 5 days, Constantinople burns. The mob, fueled by years of resentment and the intoxicating thrill of anarchy, destroys everything it can touch. The paths of Zeuxippus, with their priceless collection of ancient statues, are gutted. The Senate House is torched. Great portions of the city's main thoroughfare, the Mise, are consumed by flames, and most tragically of all, the great church of the city, the Hagia Sophia itself, is burned to the ground. This is no longer a protest about taxes or pardons. This is a revolution. The senators and aristocrats who despise Justinian for his low-born origins and his populist wife see their chance. This is not just a mob of the poor and disgruntled. The wealthy are fanning the flames, directing the chaos. They find a candidate for the throne, Hypatesius, a nephew of the former emperor. He is a reluctant usurper, but the mob doesn't care. They carry him on their shoulders to the Hippodrome, the only grand space left standing, and in the place where Justinian had been cursed, they now proclaim a new emperor. Meanwhile, in the Great Palace, a complex of buildings adjoining the Hippodrome, Justinian is trapped. He can hear the roar of the crowd proclaiming his replacement. He can see the smoke from his burning city. His generals are telling him it's over. The cause is lost. The city is gone. His advisors have a ship ready in the palace harbour. The imperial treasury is being loaded. The plan is simple. Run. Flee across the sea to safety. Live to fight another day. It is the sensible, logical thing to do. Justinian agrees. The escape is set in motion. And then Theodora speaks. We must pause here and consider this woman. Theodora, the former actress, the performer, a woman from the lowest rungs of Byzantine society, a woman whose past was so scandalous that Justinian had to change the law just to marry her. She had been a Green supporter, a woman of the people, and now, as empress, she faces the fury of those same people, and she is not afraid. She stands before her husband and his terrified council of men, and she delivers one of the most remarkable speeches in history. She tells them that flight is not an option, that to live as a deposed emperor, a fugitive, is a fate worse than death. She tells them she will not go. Royalty, she says, in words that will echo for centuries, is a fine burial shroud. Or, as another account puts it, the colour purple makes a fine funeral shroud. The message is the same. I will die an empress, here in my city, before I live as a nobody, somewhere else. Her words are like a bucket of ice water thrown on the panicking men. Her courage shames them. It stiffens Justinian's spine. The plan to flee is abandoned. A new plan is formed. A bloody, terrible but decisive one. Justinian has 2 loyal and utterly ruthless generals, Belisarius and Mundus. While the mob is distracted, celebrating their new emperor in the Hippodrome, Belisarius gathers his personal guard of elite, battle-hardened soldiers. Mundus gathers his own forces. They approach the Hippodrome from different gates. Imagine the scene inside. Tens of thousands of people are packed into the stands. They are ecstatic. They have won. They have overthrown the tyrant. They have installed their own man. They are at the peak of their power, in the very heart of their city. The air is thick with the smoke of their victory fires and the roar of their triumph. And then the gates are barred, and the soldiers enter. What happens next is not a battle, it is a slaughter. Belisarius and his men enter, swords drawn, and simply begin to kill. They start with the men on the arena floor and work their way up into the stands. There is no escape. The crowd is a panicked, screaming mass, trampling one another in a desperate attempt to flee the cold methodical steel of the soldiers. From another entrance, Mundus and his troops appear, and the trap is complete. The place of spectacle becomes a killing field. The cheers turn to screams of agony. The sand of the arena, so used to soaking up the blood of horses, now drinks the blood of the people. The killing goes on for hours. No one is spared. Blue, green, man, woman, it doesn't matter. They are all just part of the rebellion now. When it is over, the Hippodrome is silent, save for the groans of the dying. The stone tiers are slick with blood. The estimates say that 30,000 people were killed that day, perhaps more. Hypatius, the would-be emperor, is dragged before Justinian and executed. The senators who backed him are exiled, their wealth confiscated. The Nika riot is over. The beast has been slain. Justinian is now the undisputed master of Constantinople. His throne is secure, baptized in the blood of his own citizens, and from the ashes of the old city, he will begin to build his new one. The magnificent domed marvel of the new Hagia Sophia will rise from the rubble of its predecessor, a testament to God's glory, and not coincidentally, to the awesome and terrible power of his emperor. Now, where does this leave the church in all this? For centuries, Christian leaders had a deeply complicated relationship with the Hippodrome. To put it simply, they hated it. Men like the fiery preacher St. John Chrysostom, generations before Justinian, railed against the circus from his pulpit. He called it a satanic spectacle, a pageant of the devil. Why such venom? For one, it was a holdover, a loud, gaudy and wildly popular relic of pagan Rome. The obsession with the games, the gambling that surrounded them, the near worship of the charioteers, it all felt like a form of idolatry. Why were people screaming themselves hoarse for a man in a chariot when they should be in church, offering praise to God? The sheer frenzy of the crowd seemed to Chrysostom like a form of demonic possession. He saw it as a place that inflamed the basest passions of humanity, rage, lust, greed, and a lust for violence. And after the Nika riots, it would be hard for anyone to argue that he was entirely wrong. Furthermore, the theological disputes of the day were never far from the surface. The conflict between the Chalcedonians, who believed Christ had two natures, human and divine, and the Monophysites, who believed he had a single divine nature, was the great religious fault line of the empire. It was a dispute that could and did lead to riots, persecutions and schisms, and these complex theological ideas, as we've seen, often got mapped, however imperfectly, onto the blue and green factions. A victory for the blue charioteer could feel like a victory for orthodoxy. A green victory could be seen as a nod to the Monophysite cause. Justinian and Theodora themselves were a paradox. He was a staunch Chalcedonian, while she was known to be sympathetic to the Monophysites, offering them protection and patronage. The Hippodrome was the stage where these deep, intricate tensions were played out in the most simplistic and brutal way possible. My colour beats your colour, so you, the charioteer, exist in this impossible intersection. You are a celebrated hero, and in the eyes of the church, a purveyor of sin. You are a symbol of civic pride and a potential catalyst for civil war. You are adored by the masses whose passions are condemned by the priests. You have to navigate the favour of an emperor who might see you as a useful political tool one day and a dangerous liability the next. The Nika riot changed everything. It didn't end the races, not by a long shot, but it broke the political power of the factions for a generation. The raw, untamed voice of the people in the Hippodrome had been answered not with negotiation, but with a massacre. The pressure valve had been welded shut. The emperor had demonstrated, in the most unambiguous way imaginable, who was truly in charge. And for you, the lesson is carved into the stones of the rebuilt city. The roar of the crowd is a privilege, not a right. Their love is conditional. Their fury is apocalyptic. You live by their adoration, but you now understand that that adoration is a fire. It can warm you with glory and wealth, or it can swell into a conflagration that consumes the entire world, taking you with it. The chaos of the race is a game. The chaos of the crowd is history, and you are just one man, holding the reins, trying to stay ahead of both. Chapter 6. The Final Lap. Retirement, Decline, and the Echoes of Thunder. You live by their adoration, but you now understand that that adoration is a fire. It can warm you with glory and wealth, or it can swell into a conflagration that consumes the entire world, taking you with it. The chaos of the race is a game. The chaos of the crowd is history, and you are just one man, holding the reins, trying to stay ahead of both. But you can't stay ahead forever. No one can, not even you. The realization doesn't come in a sudden dramatic flash like a divine vision from on high. It's not a single moment of clarity. It's a slow, creeping dawn, a gradual accumulation of tiny, undeniable truths that you've been trying your best to ignore for years. It starts in your bones, a deep, persistent ache in your left shoulder, the one you dislocated twice after being thrown against the spiner. It's a dull throb in your right knee, where a rival's wheel shattered your kneecap and left you with a limp that only vanishes when the adrenaline of the race takes hold. It's in the web of silver scars that crisscross your arms and chest, each one a story, each one a souvenir from a dance with death you were lucky to survive. You start to notice it in the mornings. Waking up used to be a simple act. Now it's a negotiation. You lie there on your linen sheets, listening to the sounds of the city waking up outside your window, and you take inventory. You mentally catalogue the aches, the stiffness, the quiet protests of a body that has been battered, twisted, and pushed to its absolute limit for 2 decades. Your hands, which once held the reins with an iron, unshakable grip, are now gnarled. The knuckles are swollen. The fingers don't quite straighten anymore. They look less like the hands of a celebrated athlete and more like the roots of an old, weathered olive tree. Then you notice it on the track, a fractional hesitation, a split second where your younger self would have seen a gap and plunged through it without a thought. You now see only the spinning wheels, the flashing hooves, the 50 different ways this could end in disaster. The brutal mathematics of the race, which once felt like an intuitive language, now feels like a complex equation you have to solve consciously. The younger racers, their faces taut with a hunger you recognize all too well, seem impossibly fast. They take risks that you now see as foolish, suicidal even, and yet they succeed. They ride with a kind of reckless grace that you've started to lose, a belief in their own immortality that has been chipped away from you, piece by painful piece, with every crash, every injury, every friend you've buried. The actuarial tables on your life expectancy were not, shall we say, trending in a positive direction from the day you first stepped into a chariot, but now you can feel the odds shortening with every lap. You've seen what happens to charioteers who stay too long. You've seen the legends, men whose names were sung in the taverns, end their careers smeared across the sand, a tangle of leather, wood, and broken humanity. You've seen them lose their nerve, becoming timid and cautious, a shadow of their former selves, jeered by the very crowds that once worshipped them. There is no greater humiliation. To be forgotten is one thing, to be pitied is another entirely. The final lap of your career isn't run on the sand of the Hippodrome. It's run in the quiet corners of your own mind, in the dead of night. It's a race against a new opponent, one you can't outmaneuver or force into a wall. It's the ghost of your own future. And one day, after a particularly close call, a snapped axle, a panicked horse, a moment where you saw the face of the god of death in the dust cloud ahead, you make the decision. You pull your horse to a stop not at the finish line, but at the stables. You unbuckle the leather straps, your fingers fumbling, and you hang the reins on a hook, and you walk away. The roar of the crowd is still in your ears, but for the first time, you're not listening. The silence that follows is both terrifying and profoundly peaceful. The race is over. So what now? What becomes of a storm when it ceases to move? For a charioteer of your stature, a living legend, retirement isn't a descent into poverty. It's a transition. You are, by the standards of any age, fantastically wealthy. The prize money, the gifts from adoring senators, the bonuses from the faction masters, it has all been carefully invested. You own sprawling estates in the countryside of Thrace, villas overlooking the Sea of Marmara, and several apartment blocks or insula in Constantinople itself, which provide a steady stream of rental income. You are no longer just a racer, you are a businessman, a property magnate. Your days change from a brutal routine of training and life-threatening competition to a leisurely procession of management. You wake late, you are attended by slaves who draw your bath, who massage your aching muscles with scented oils, who dress you in fine silk tunics instead of sweat-stained leather. You break your fast with honey cakes and wine, reading over reports from your estate managers. The price of wheat is up. The olive harvest was good this year. A tenant in the Maisie district is late on his rent again. These are your new concerns. Instead of calculating the angle needed to take the spinner at full speed, you are now calculating profit margins and crop yields. It is, you must admit, significantly safer. You become a fixture of the city's social scene in a new way. You are invited to dinner parties in the lavish homes of the aristocracy, the very people who once wagered fortunes on you. They treat you with a curious mixture of fawning respect and condescension. To them, you are a fascinating specimen, a marvel of low-born grit, who somehow ascended to their level. They want to hear your stories of the track, the close calls, the famous victories. You tell them, of course, editing out the grime and the terror, burnishing the legend. You are their performing animal, their gladiator emeritus, and you play the part because it is good for business. Connections are everything in this city. Perhaps you become a patron. The Greens, your faction, the family that made you, still needs you, not for your skill with the reins, but for your gold and your eye for talent. You now sit in the lavish private boxes of the Hippodrome, high above the sweat and the danger. You are a faction owner, a team manager. You scout for new talent in the dusty provinces, looking for that same fire you once had in some wiry, determined teenager. You fund the stables, ensuring the horses are the best fed, the best groomed. You oversee the trainers, the grooms, the physicians, the wheelwrights. You have become the man you once answered to. It's a strange, disembodying experience. You watch the races from your cushioned seat, a cup of chilled wine in your hand. You see a young, reckless green charioteer attempt a move you perfected a decade ago, and you feel a phantom lurch in your gut. You see him succeed, and a part of you swells with pride, the pride of an owner, a mentor. But another, deeper part of you feels a sharp, bitter pang of envy. The roar of the crowd washes over you, but it's not for you, not anymore. They are screaming a new name. You are a ghost at your own feast. Sometimes you walk down to the stables after a race. The smell is the same, that intoxicating mix of hay, horse sweat, leather and manure. It's the smell of your youth. The young racers, their faces flushed with victory or grim with defeat, look at you with awe. You are the legend, the old master. You offer a quiet word of advice, a critique of their form, a nod of approval. They hang on your every word, but you see the gap between you. You are history. They are the now. They cannot truly understand you, and you can no longer truly be one of them. You are a monument, respected, admired, but ultimately cold and still. This gilded cage, this comfortable retirement, was the prize for only a select few. For every Diocles, for every Porphyrius, there were 100 anonymous racers whose names are lost to us, etched only on the betting slips of a forgotten afternoon. What became of them? The journeymen, the mid-tier competitors, the ones who were good but never great? Their retirement was not a gentle slide into a life of land ownership and respectable patronage. Theirs was a much harder landing. They didn't have the vast winnings to cushion their fall. They had enough to live on for a few years, perhaps to buy a small shop or a tavern. But the lure of the life they knew was strong. Many of them ended up right back where they started, in the stables. Only now, they weren't the stars. They were the trainers, the grooms, the men who mucked out the stalls and polished the leather harnesses. You would see them around the Hippodrome, their faces weathered, their bodies bearing the permanent marks of their trade, a pronounced limp, a missing finger, a face scarred by a long-ago crash. They would watch the races with an expert's eye, shouting unsolicited advice from the rails, their voices lost in the din. In the taverns near the grounds, they would nurse a cup of cheap wine and tell stories of their glory days to anyone who would listen, their victories growing grander with each retelling. They were haunted men, living in the shadow of a younger, faster version of themselves. They were a constant, walking reminder to the current racers. This is how it ends for most of us. Your name, screamed by 100,000 throats today, can be a forgotten whisper tomorrow. And for some, the end was even less dignified. The addiction to the crowd, to the adrenaline, was too much to give up. With their skills faded and their bodies broken, they couldn't compete at the highest level. So they drifted to the dusty provincial tracks in places like Antioch or Alexandria. Here, in the minor leagues, they could still race. They could still hear a crowd, however small, cheer their name. They were the aging stars clinging to a spotlight that had long since moved on, chasing the ghost of a feeling they could never recapture, often ending their lives in a meaningless race in a forgotten corner of the empire. Regardless of the path, a profound and unshakable silence descended on the life of a retired charioteer. For 20 years, your life was defined by noise, the thunder of hooves, the screech of wheels, the cracking of whips, the desperate shouts of your rivals, and above it all, the constant, deafening, soul-shaking roar of the Hippodrome. It was the soundtrack to your life, the air you breathed, and now it's gone. Your villa is quiet, the countryside is quiet, even the bustling streets of Constantinople seem muted, distant. The silence is a physical presence. It presses in on you. In the dead of night you'll swear you can still hear it, a phantom echo in your ears, the ghost of 100,000 voices. You will close your eyes and feel the phantom pull of the reins in your gnarled hands, the jolt of the chariot as it skids around the turn. You've left the Hippodrome, but in some ways it will never, ever leave you. And in a strange, echoing symmetry, as your own body began to betray the relentless demands of the track, the empire itself began to feel its own aches and pains. As your personal sun began to set, so too did the sun begin to set on the Hippodrome itself, a decline that was just as slow, just as imperceptible at first, and just as inevitable. The decline of chariot racing wasn't a single event, it was a death by 1,000 cuts, a long, slow fading over centuries. It didn't end because of one emperor's decree or one catastrophic event. It simply became unsustainable. The world changed around it, and the Hippodrome, that great thundering heart of the city, slowly, quietly began to fail. One of the first and most persistent causes was, as is so often the case in history, money. It's the least romantic reason, but perhaps the most powerful. Running the Hippodrome was ruinously expensive. Think about the logistics. It wasn't just about paying the prize money for the charioteers, though that was a fortune in itself. You had to maintain the structure itself, a colossal stadium that was constantly in need of repair. You had the vast stables, housing hundreds, if not thousands, of the finest horses in the world. These weren't just any horses. They were elite athletes, the product of generations of careful breeding, sourced from the best grasslands in North Africa and the plains of Cappadocia. They required armies of grooms, trainers, and veterinarians. Their diets were more specialized and expensive than those of most citizens of the empire. The cost of feeding and caring for this equine population alone was a significant line item in the imperial budget. Then you had the chariots themselves, lightweight, precision-engineered machines that were constantly being damaged or destroyed and needing replacement. You had the staff, the faction managers, the guards, the cleanup crews. The entire enterprise was a black hole for gold. For centuries, while the empire was at its peak, this was a justifiable expense. The games were more than entertainment. They were a political necessity. They kept the massive, often volatile population of Constantinople happy and distracted. They were a display of the emperor's power and generosity, a symbol of the Pax Romana and the glory of the state. It was, in modern terms, a massive state subsidy for a public good. But the empire began to shrink. The crises of the 7th century were a turning point. The relentless, exhausting wars with the Sasanian Persians, followed almost immediately by the lightning-fast Arab conquests, changed everything. The empire lost Egypt and Syria, its breadbasket, and two of its wealthiest provinces. It also lost the vast grasslands of North Africa, the primary breeding grounds for the best racing horses. Suddenly, the supply chain was cut. The best horses became exponentially more expensive and harder to acquire. At the same time, the threats to the empire were no longer distant frontier skirmishes. They were existential. The Arabs were at the gates of Constantinople itself. The Slavs and Bulgars were pressing down from the Balkans. Every single piece of gold, every solidus, was desperately needed. An emperor now had to make a choice, a brutally practical one. Do you fund a new squadron of Dromon warships to defend the Aegean from pirates, or do you fund a season of chariot races? Do you pay the salaries of the soldiers shivering on the northern frontier, or do you pay the exorbitant fee for a star charioteer? The imperial accountants, men with no romance in their souls, started looking at the budget for the Hippodrome and saw not a cherished tradition, but a colossal financial drain. Slowly, incrementally, the funding was cut. There were fewer race days in the year. The prize money was reduced. The factions had to operate on tighter budgets. The quality of the horses began to decline. The spectacle, while still impressive, began to lose a bit of its shine. It was a slow, grinding process of austerity that bled the life out of the sport. Alongside the economic decay, a deeper, more profound cultural shift was taking place. The very soul of the empire was changing. Byzantium was becoming a more intensely Christian, more pious, more inward-looking society. In the early days, the church had a complicated relationship with the games. Many church fathers condemned the Hippodrome as a hotbed of paganism, violence, idolatry, and immoral betting. It was a place of worldly distraction, pulling the minds of the faithful away from God and salvation. St. John Chrysostom, the fiery Archbishop of Constantinople, thundered against it from his pulpit in the Hagia Sophia, calling it the seat of the pestilences and the devil's own pomp. For a long time, the population largely ignored these warnings. The pull of the track was too strong. But over the centuries, the message began to sink in. The culture of the empire was slowly being remade in a more overtly religious image. The public's focus began to shift from worldly spectacle to spiritual devotion. The heroes of the age were no longer charioteers, but saints, ascetics, and holy monks. People still went to the Hippodrome, but the obsessive, all-consuming passion began to wane. Other forms of public ceremony, many of them religious, began to take precedence. The grand imperial processions that once culminated in the games now often ended at the doors of a church. The emperors themselves reflected this change. Early emperors like Justinian were passionate, almost obsessive fans. Later emperors, particularly after the 7th century, were often pious military men. They saw the games less as a political necessity and more as a frivolous and expensive holdover from a pagan past. They might attend out of a sense of duty, to show their face to the people, but their heart wasn't in it. Their patronage became less enthusiastic, more perfunctory, and without the emperor's fervent support, the Hippodrome lost its central anchor. Tastes, too, simply changed. This is a harder thing to quantify, but it's a fundamental human truth. What captivates one generation can seem stale and old-fashioned to the next. New forms of entertainment and courtly ritual began to emerge. Contact with the Persian and Arab worlds introduced new ideas. The Byzantine court became fascinated with polo, which they called tsikanayan. The emperor built a special stadium, the Tsikanisterien, right next to the Great Palace. It was a sport for the aristocracy, a display of elite horsemanship and martial skill that felt more modern, more current than the old-fashioned chariot races. Later, in the 11th and 12th centuries, as contact with Western Europe increased, the ideals of chivalry and the tournament began to filter in. Jousting became a popular spectacle. For the elite, these newer, more martial sports seemed more relevant to their status as a warrior aristocracy. Chariot racing, with its professional, often low-born stars, began to look a bit common, a bit vulgar, a relic of a bygone era. It was like an old song that everyone knew, but no one really wanted to listen to anymore. The Hippodrome was still there, the races were still run, but the cultural energy that had sustained it for a millennium was slowly seeping away. The final catastrophic blow was not a slow decay, but a sudden violent trauma, an event so shocking it fractured the Byzantine world forever. In the year 1204, the unthinkable happened. The soldiers of the Fourth Crusade, fellow Christians from the West, diverted from their path to the Holy Land, and driven by a toxic mix of greed and religious animosity, turned on Constantinople. For 3 days they sacked the wealthiest city in Christendom. They murdered, they looted, they desecrated, they broke into the Hagia Sophia and placed a prostitute on the Patriarch's throne. It was an act of cultural vandalism on an unimaginable scale, and they came for the Hippodrome. They didn't see it as a sacred civic space. They saw it as a treasure chest. They tore down the priceless bronze and marble statues that had lined the Spina for centuries, masterpieces of Greek and Roman art collected from all corners of the world. They were melted down for coin, and most symbolic of all, they climbed to the top of the Kathisma, the imperial box, and took down the 4 magnificent bronze horses, the quadriga that had overlooked the finish line for 900 years. They were a symbol of the city, a testament to its Roman heritage and its mastery of the games. The Venetians carted them away as plunder, and in the ultimate act of triumphant humiliation, mounted them on the facade of St. Mark's Basilica in Venice, where they remain to this day. The sack of 1204 shattered Constantinople. The Byzantines eventually recaptured their city 57 years later, but it was a ghost of its former self. The population was decimated, its wealth was gone, its spirit was broken. The restored empire was a fragile, impoverished shadow. There was no money, no will, and no real purpose for reviving the grand, extravagant spectacle of the chariot races. The Hippodrome, stripped of its art, its glory, its very soul, fell silent. The factions, the blues and the greens, which had defined the city's social and political life for 1,000 years, simply vanished. They had no reason to exist anymore. The thunder of the hooves was replaced by the whisper of the wind blowing through a vast, empty ruin. You, the retired charioteer, would have been an old man by then, if you were lucky enough to have survived that long. You would have witnessed the decline firsthand. You would have seen the crowds thin, the quality of the races diminish. And then, you would have watched in horror as the barbarian crusaders tore your city, your world apart. You would have seen them pry the bronze horses from their perch, the horses that had looked down on every victory, every defeat of your long career. It would have been like watching them carve out the heart of a god. After the sack, what was left of the Hippodrome entered a long, slow twilight. It was too vast, too central to be completely ignored, but its primary function was gone forever. It became a space for occasional, less organized spectacles. Jousting tournaments were held there by the restored Byzantine emperors, and later by the Latin knights, a pale imitation of its former glory. It was a vast open-air arena, a convenient public square, but its grand structures began to crumble. Without the constant upkeep, the marble seating cracked, weeds grew between the stones. The city, impoverished and struggling, had more pressing concerns than maintaining an old, unused stadium. People began to see it not as a monument, but as a quarry. When a nobleman needed marble for his new palace, or when the city needed to repair a section of the sea walls, they would send workers to the Hippodrome. They would pry up the seats where emperors and 100,000 citizens had once sat, and they would break them up for building materials. The spina, once the glittering backbone of the games, was dismantled piece by piece. The great monuments were toppled or carted away. The Hippodrome was slowly cannibalized. Its own body used to patch up the wounds of a dying city. When the Ottoman Sultan, Mehmed the Conqueror, took the city in 1453, the Hippodrome was little more than a ruinous field, dotted with a few surviving monuments. The Ottomans, practical rulers, had no use for a Roman-style racetrack. They saw a large, convenient open space in the heart of their new capital. They called it the At Meidana, the Horse Square, and in a strange echo of its past, it once again became a centre for equestrian activity, but of a very different kind. It was a place for military parades, for the elite janissaries to practice their horsemanship, for public ceremonies and festivals. The ghost of its old function remained. It was still a place where the rulers and the people came together, but instead of the roar of chariot races, there was the tramp of marching soldiers. Instead of factional riots between blues and greens, there were janissary revolts, where the once loyal troops would overturn their great soup cauldrons in the square as a sign of rebellion. The space was the same, but the drama it hosted had changed entirely. And now tonight, if you were to drift through modern Istanbul, you could go and stand in that very spot. It's no longer a stadium. It's a beautifully landscaped public park, Sultanahmet Square. It lies nestled between two of the world's greatest buildings, the celestial blue domes of the Sultanahmet Mosque on one side, and the sublime, earth-shattering dome of the Hagia Sophia on the other. Tourists stroll where you once risked your life. Children laugh and chase pigeons on the ground that was once soaked with the sweat of your horses. It's almost all gone. The vast, tiered seating, the imperial box, the stables, the starting gates, all have vanished, buried under the soil of centuries. But not everything. If you know where to look, you can still find the ghosts. You can still touch the last lingering echoes of the thunder you created. Walk down the centre of the park. You are walking along the line of the old spina, and there, rising before you, are three ancient sentinels, three survivors from your time. First, you see the great granite obelisk of the Egyptian pharaoh Thutmose III. You remember it. You remember the talk of the city when the Emperor Theodosius had it brought from Egypt and erected it on a new marble base. You raced around it 1,000 times. The carvings on its base still show Theodosius in the imperial box, watching your race, just as he did so many centuries ago. He is there, frozen in marble, and you are there, a ghost in the air, both of you locked in that moment forever. A little further on, you see a strange, twisted column of bronze, sunk into a pit. This is the serpent column. You remember it in its glory, when its three intertwined bronze serpent heads supported a golden tripod. It was ancient even in your day, a trophy brought from the Oracle of Delphi in Greece. The golden tripod is long gone. The heads have been broken off. One is in the nearby archaeology museum, but the base remains, a contorted, mysterious witness that saw every single race you ever ran. And finally, at the far end, there is a rough, pockmarked stone pillar, known as the walled obelisk. It looks crude compared to the Egyptian one, but you remember when it was sheathed in gleaming bronze plates, a shining beacon that caught the afternoon sun. The Crusaders ripped off the bronze to melt it down, leaving only the stone core behind, scarred and weathered, but still standing, defiant. These three objects are all that remain of the physical structure of your world, a finish line for ghosts. Standing there, in the quiet of a modern evening, with the call to prayer echoing from the minarets, you can close your eyes, You can try to block out the sounds of the traffic and the gentle murmur of the tourists. And if you listen hard enough, with the ear of memory, you can almost hear it. You can hear the faint, distant thunder of 40 hooves striking the sand. You can hear the rumble of the wheels, the crack of a whip, the roar of a crowd that has been silent for 800 years. It's just an echo now, a story whispered on the wind. Your name is forgotten, the factions are gone, the empire is dust. But the idea of you, the charioteer, the hero of the Hippodrome, still haunts this small patch of earth. You were more than just an athlete. You were the living embodiment of the city's passion, its glory, its fury, and its chaos. You were a low-born man who became a god for an afternoon. Every afternoon, you held the reins of history, however briefly, and as you finally let go and allow the deep, quiet peace of retirement to become the deeper, quieter peace of history itself, you can rest, knowing that the echoes of the thunder you made will never truly fade away. They are carved into the very stones of the city, waiting for anyone quiet enough to listen.